In an unexpected turn of events, Elon Musk finds himself at the center of a fierce attack from a US Congressman during a public hearing. But what happens next will leave you stunned. Musk's response is nothing short of legendary. Watch as the tension builds, the confrontation intensifies, and Musk delivers an unforgettable reaction that shocks the entire assembly. You won't believe how this heated exchange ends. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more jaw-dropping moments like this. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. The legislative hearing was already packed with tension, as many of the nation's most powerful figures had gathered to discuss the future of technology, innovation, and regulation. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur and CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, had been invited to testify before Congress, hoping to address concerns about the rapid advancements of his companies and the implications of their products on society. The committee room buzzed with chatter as reporters shuffled papers, cameras flashed, and members of the assembly readied their questions. Musk sat at the witness table, looking calm, collected, and unfazed by the scrutiny he was about to face. He had been through these types of hearings before, and if there was one thing Musk was known for, it was his ability to keep his cool in even the most heated moments. But today was different. As Musk adjusted his posture, a prominent congressman, known for his vocal criticism of tech giants, stood up. Congressman William Graves had long been a thorn in Musk's side, vocal in his belief that powerful figures like Musk were dangerously unchecked and too powerful. The entire room fell silent as Graves began his tirade. His voice was sharp, deliberate, and laced with a sharp sense of indignation. "You've built an empire, Mr. Musk, but at what cost?" Graves began, his eyes fixed on Musk. "Your companies have exploded in size and influence, yet you continue to avoid answering fundamental questions about the consequences of your actions. Just last month, Tesla's self-driving cars were involved in another fatal accident, and your social media habits continue to stir division and distrust. How do you justify this power, Mr. Musk? How can you sit here and act as though there are no real-world consequences to your reckless behavior?" The room held its breath. This was no ordinary questioning. Graves wasn't just asking Musk about his products. He was attacking Musk's very character, his legacy, and his values. The congressman's words cut deep, and the audience could sense the shift in the room. Musk's face remained calm, but was there a flicker of irritation? A slight tightening of the jaw? It was impossible to tell, but the challenge was clear. Graves had just drawn the first blood. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment as the tension escalated. The congressman's words hung heavy in the air. Would Musk respond defensively, or would he rise above it and play the part of the calm, composed businessman? And then, the unthinkable happened. Musk leaned forward, his hands resting lightly on the table. His response was slow, deliberate, but his eyes gleamed with a mixture of challenge and confidence. "Congressman Graves," Musk began, his voice measured but carrying an undeniable weight, "I understand your concerns, but let me be clear. We are not in the business of reckless behavior. We are pushing boundaries in order to make a future for humanity that's sustainable. If we aren't willing to take risks and innovate, we'll stagnate. And frankly, I'd rather be in the position of taking calculated risks than standing by, doing nothing." The room was silent, the audience unsure of how to react. Was Musk brushing off the congressman's criticism, or was there something more to this? But Graves wasn't done. He leaned in, his expression growing more intense. "Calculated risks?" he repeated. "Your companies are not just experimenting with cars and rockets, Mr. Musk. You are experimenting with the future of civilization. You can't just throw out a few catchy lines about innovation to avoid accountability. People's lives are at stake." Musk's eyes narrowed slightly. The confrontation was intensifying, and the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't a simple back and forth. This was a battle of ideals, a fight for control over the direction of the future. And Musk, for all his calmness, wasn't about to back down. With a small but knowing smile, Musk leaned back in his chair. "I don't think you understand," he said, the words deliberately slow. "The future won't wait for us to catch up. It's already happening, with or without your approval." The room was on edge. Congressman Graves' words had hit hard, but Elon Musk's reply was like a sharp blow to the gut, one that left everyone uncertain of how to react. The silence lingered as the tension between the two men hung in the air, like an electric charge, waiting to be unleashed. No one in the room could have predicted the next move. Musk's casual demeanor remained, but there was something almost unsettling about the calmness with which he responded. He had been questioned by senators, debated with journalists, and confronted by some of the most powerful figures in the world. But this felt different. There was a rawness to the moment, a personal edge that Musk wasn't accustomed to showing in public. Graves, however, wasn't about to let the billionaire's deflection slide. His eyes were cold, his posture stiff with the weight of his role. As a public servant, a man tasked with holding Musk accountable in front of the nation. This wasn't just about tech companies anymore. It was about power, influence, and the very foundation of democracy itself. "Mr. Musk," Graves began, his voice rising in volume and intensity, "you sit there and act as if the risks you take are somehow justified by your vision. But your so-called calculated risks are endangering the very fabric of society. You have a history of ignoring regulations, sidestepping rules, and putting profits over people. Do you really believe that you, as a billionaire, can simply act above the law? That the consequences of your actions don't matter?" Musk's face twitched. This was no longer just a debate. It was a direct challenge to his character, his intentions, and his legacy. Musk wasn't accustomed to being painted as the villain. He was the visionary, the disruptor, the man who wanted to change the world. But here, in front of a room full of witnesses, Graves was attempting to strip away that veneer, to reduce Musk to nothing more than a greedy businessman with no regard for the people he affected. But Musk wasn't backing down. His eyes locked onto Graves with a steady gaze that seemed to pierce through the congressman's accusations. Musk opened his mouth to speak, but this time it wasn't to deflect or dismiss. It was to make a point. He wasn't just defending his actions, he was going to flip the narrative. "Let me ask you something, Congressman," Musk said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "How many lives have been saved by the innovations we've created? How many people are driving safer cars because of Tesla's advancements in self-driving technology? How many lives will be changed when we get to Mars and create a sustainable future for humanity? You talk about consequences, but you fail to recognize the far-reaching impact of what we're doing. We're not building empires, Congressman. We're building futures." The room was still. The committee members who had been prepared to see a heated exchange were now stunned into silence. Musk's words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. The press, too, was quiet, their cameras still trained on the two men as they exchanged verbal blows. Graves, visibly rattled, took a step back. His face twisted in frustration as he clutched his notes, trying to maintain control over the situation. He had expected Musk to stammer, to shrink back under the pressure. But instead, Musk was standing tall, confident, and more determined than ever. "You want to talk about Mars?" Graves sneered. "You think going to Mars makes you some kind of hero? You're not a hero, Musk. You're a man who is using his wealth and influence to bend the world to your will." Musk stood up slowly, the spotlight now firmly on him. The audience could feel the shift in the room as Musk towered over the table, his presence commanding and undeniable. For the first time, the tension reached its peak. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was a battle of ideologies, and Musk had made it clear that he wasn't going to back down. "I don't need your approval, Congressman," Musk said firmly. "What I'm doing is not about pleasing anyone. It's about creating a future where humanity can survive and thrive. You want to criticize me for taking risks? Fine, but at least recognize the bigger picture. We're creating change, whether you like it or not. As the words left his mouth, the room erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs. The congressman's attack had been met with an overwhelming response, one that shifted the power dynamics in the room. Musk wasn't just defending himself. He was owning the moment. Was this the moment Musk had been waiting for? The opportunity to prove that he could stand toe-to-toe with the very people who sought to hold him accountable? The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The room was electric with energy. The momentum had shifted completely in Musk's favor, and yet Congressman Graves wasn't finished. His jaw tightened as Musk's words echoed in his ears, but instead of retreating, Graves charged ahead. His hands gripped the edges of the desk, his knuckles white, and his eyes narrowed into slits as he prepared his next move. He wasn't going to let Musk walk away with the upper hand. You speak of change, Mr. Musk, but what you fail to understand is that innovation is not a free pass to bypass responsibility. Graves shot back, his voice dripping with disdain. Your companies are not immune from the consequences of their actions. People have died because of your innovations. People have suffered because of your greed and your refusal to acknowledge basic safety protocols. Do you think you can just erase those lives because you're building rockets and electric cars? Graves' words hung in the air, like a challenge that Musk could not ignore. The room shifted. The faces in the audience now locked on Musk, waiting for him to crack under the pressure. This was the moment that could determine everything. Would Musk double down, or would the relentless pressure from the congressman force him to stumble? For a brief moment Musk paused. His expression was inscrutable, his eyes cool, but something had changed. The air felt thicker, as if the stakes had risen even higher. It wasn't just a public confrontation anymore, it was a direct assault on everything Musk had built. Yet, even as the pressure mounted, Musk remained calm. He was no stranger to controversy, no stranger to being in the public eye and facing tough questions. But this was different. This was personal. Musk leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Graves with an intensity that could not be ignored. He wasn't angry, but there was a fire in his eyes, a determination to prove that he was right, to prove that his vision for the future was worth the risk. The people you speak of, Congressman, Musk began, his voice measured but firm. I'm not blind to their tragedies. No one in this room is. But you're focusing on the wrong thing. You want to point out the failures without looking at the lives we've saved. The millions of people who now drive safer. The thousands of jobs we've created. The breakthroughs in energy that have reduced emissions. Yes, there have been setbacks, but what you fail to see is the bigger picture. No one changes the world without facing resistance. The room seemed to exhale collectively, as if each person had been holding their breath, waiting for Musk's response. This was no longer just about Tesla's self-driving cars or SpaceX's rockets. It was about Musk's entire philosophy, his commitment to pushing boundaries at any cost. His words cut through the air like a declaration of war against the very system that had been set up to regulate and constrain innovation. Graves, still standing behind his podium, appeared taken aback. His confidence faltered, just for a moment, as Musk's rebuttal landed with the precision of a master debater. The congressman's lips tightened, and he forced himself to regain composure, but the tide was beginning to shift in Musk's favor. How dare you, Graves spat, his tone rising. How dare you sit here and tell me that progress justifies lives lost? You think the people who died in your Tesla crashes were just collateral damage? Are they just numbers to you? Musk's eyes hardened, but his voice remained unshaken. That's not what I'm saying, he replied, his words slow and deliberate. I'm saying that every great leap forward comes with sacrifices. Every single one. But to make real progress, to make the future better, we have to take risks. If you want to sit back and play it safe, fine. But that's not how change happens. The room fell silent again, the weight of Musk's words settling on everyone present. For the first time in the entire hearing, it seemed like Graves had lost his footing. Musk was no longer the cornered billionaire trying to defend his empire. He had become the champion of innovation, the man who dared to take on the impossible and had the courage to stand firm against the very forces that sought to slow him down. Graves' response was almost mechanical now, his frustration mounting. "You're delusional if you think your actions aren't part of the problem," he muttered, his voice still tinged with anger. But even as the words left his mouth, it was clear. He was losing this battle. The room knew it. Musk knew it. And even Graves was beginning to realize it. What started as a public attack on Musk had transformed into an ideological clash, one that Musk was clearly winning. The reality was simple. Musk was not just defending his companies, he was defending a vision that challenged the very establishment that Graves represented. It was the establishment's worst nightmare. A man who was too big, too bold, and too influential to be contained. As the tension in the room continued to simmer, all eyes remained locked on Musk. Would he continue to dominate the conversation? Or would Graves find a way to turn the tables? The air in the room had shifted completely. What began as a clash between a congressman and a billionaire had transformed into a battle of ideologies, an unspoken war between tradition and progress. The tension was palpable, like a wire stretched, too tight, ready to snap. Even the congressional aides, once absorbed in their papers and notes, couldn't help but look up, sensing the dramatic turn the conversation had taken. Elon Musk stood unwavering, his posture a testament to his confidence. He had weathered the storm of attacks, his calm and calculated responses dismantling every argument that had been hurled at him. The congressman's bluster had begun to falter, and Musk wasn't about to give him an inch of ground. But this was not just about winning the argument. It was about sending a message, one that had been building for years. "I understand your frustration," Musk said, his voice still level but tinged with a newfound edge. "You're worried about the unknown. You're worried about what happens when the world changes too fast. But let me ask you this. What's the alternative? We can stay stuck in the past, cling to the old ways, and pretend that nothing needs to change. But that's not an option anymore. The world is evolving, whether we like it or not. And we have a choice: adapt or get left behind." For the first time, the room seemed to hold its breath. The confrontation had escalated to the point where it was no longer just about Musk's business decisions, it was about the very direction of the future. Musk wasn't just defending his companies, he was defending the entire concept of innovation, of risk, and of forging ahead into uncharted territory. And in that moment, he knew that the stakes were higher than ever. Graves, visibly agitated, gripped the edge of his desk harder, his knuckles now a stark white against the wood. "You're a fool if you think that's the answer," he shot back. "Innovation doesn't justify reckless decisions. It doesn't justify playing God with people's lives, and it doesn't give you a free pass to skirt around regulations that were put in place for a reason." Musk's eyes narrowed, but his voice never wavered. "Regulations are important," he conceded. "But they can't be a barrier to progress. They need to evolve, too. The old system wasn't built for the speed at which we're moving now. The future is happening at an exponential rate, and we need new rules, new thinking, if we're going to keep up. Sitting here, clinging to outdated laws, won't stop change. It will only delay it." The audience was silent, absorbed in every word that Musk spoke. What was once a simple congressional hearing had turned into a historic moment, a clash of old and new, of stability and progress. Everyone knew that this was more than just a debate about Tesla's self-driving cars or SpaceX's rockets. This was a defining moment in the battle for the future, a moment that would leave a lasting impact. Graves, now visibly flustered, took a deep breath. He had come into this hearing expecting to take Musk down a few pegs, to publicly expose the flaws in his empire. But Musk's unwavering confidence, his ability to respond with precision and poise, had completely upended the narrative. Graves was losing his grip. The room could feel it. The congressman was no longer the one in control. Musk had flipped the script, and now it was his turn to guide the conversation. "Let me ask you this, Congressman," Musk said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You talk about the rules and regulations, but where were those same rules when the world was asking for a new energy solution? Where were the regulations when people were still driving cars that belched toxic fumes into the atmosphere? Where were the rules when our planet was on the brink of a climate crisis? You can't sit there and act like the old system has all the answers." For a moment, Graves was speechless. His eyes darted around the room looking for support, but all he found was silence. The words that Musk had just spoken were too powerful to ignore, too undeniable. Musk wasn't just defending himself. He was speaking for a future that Graves and others like him were desperately trying to hold back. And in that moment, the room seemed to shift again. It wasn't just a battle of words. It was a battle for the future. The congressman's reliance on the past was clashing with Musk's vision of what the world could become. And no matter how much Graves tried to hold on to the old ways, he knew that Musk was right. The world was changing. The silence stretched on, as if everyone was waiting for Graves to respond. But even he knew there was nothing more he could say. Musk had made his point, and he had done so with the kind of precision and conviction that left no room for argument. Would Graves continue his attack, or had he reached the end of his line? And what would happen next, when the full weight of this confrontation settled in? The room hung in a tense, almost suffocating silence. Even the congressman's usual supporters, who had been watching with a keen eye, couldn't help but sense that the tide had turned. The overwhelming sense of anticipation was thick in the air. Everyone knew that the next move was crucial. Graves, for all his bluster, was cornered, and Musk had made it clear that he was not about to back down. But now came the final test. Would the congressman have the courage to admit defeat, or would he double down and risk making himself look even more out of touch? The question hung in the air as Graves's face flushed with frustration. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. But it was clear to everyone in the room that his words were no longer carrying the same weight they once did. His attacks on Musk had fallen flat. His old arguments were no match for Musk's vision of the future. I don't think you understand the gravity of what you're doing," Graves stammered, his voice strained but desperate to find some ground. "This isn't just about business or technology. It's about people's lives. There are real consequences to your actions, Mr. Musk." Musk tilted his head, his gaze piercing. There was no anger in his eyes, no defensiveness, just a calm certainty that made Graves' words seem increasingly irrelevant. "I understand more than you think," Musk replied, his voice steady but firm. "The future is going to be hard for some people to accept, but it's happening, whether we want it or not. And I'll take the risks, because someone has to. We can't keep waiting for the right moment, the perfect moment. Sometimes you have to take action, even when it's uncomfortable." The congressman's hand tightened into a fist on the desk, and for a split second it seemed like he might lash out. But the moment passed. Instead, Graves took a step back, his shoulders sagging, his face a mix of frustration and defeat. He had tried everything, every tactic, every argument. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Musk's words had cut through the noise, and the truth was undeniable. The future was already here. Whether it was Musk's electric cars or his groundbreaking work with SpaceX, the world was changing at a pace that left old systems and outdated thinking behind. Musk wasn't just defending his own empire. He was defending the progress of humanity itself. And in that moment, the congressman knew he had been outmatched. The camera zoomed in on Musk as he stood tall, a quiet smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. His calm demeanor had not only won the room over, but it had shifted the narrative entirely. The questioning had been relentless, but Musk had answered with the kind of poise that only a visionary could. He had turned an attack into an opportunity to showcase his ideals, his unwavering belief in the power of innovation and progress. As the hearing finally drew to a close, the congressman's final words were little more than a stammer, barely audible. But the message had been made clear. Musk's vision was too strong, too compelling, to be dismissed with empty rhetoric. The world had no time for outdated arguments. The future would be shaped by those willing to take risks, to push boundaries, and to pave the way for a better tomorrow. When the cameras stopped rolling and the congressman retreated, a sense of resolution settled over the room. Musk had not only responded to the attacks, he had transformed the entire conversation. His presence had been magnetic, his words sharp and persuasive. The future wasn't just something to be talked about in abstract terms, it was unfolding before their eyes, and Musk had shown everyone exactly what it looked like. And as he left the hearing, with cameras flashing and the world watching, it was clear that this moment had been a victory, not just for Musk, but for anyone daring to push the boundaries of what was possible. In the end, Musk's response wasn't just about defending himself or his companies. It was about defending the very concept of progress. And when faced with an old guard determined to hold back the tide of change, Elon Musk had emerged as the clear victor, showing the world that the future was unstoppable.